Hi, I'm Deboki and this is Okie Dokie Boki, and today I am going to be doing another library check-in video. I think this is my third time doing this video, and I've just definitely found that by doing it I've been a little bit better about, like, I don't know, being, I guess, conscientious of like how I use the library. I feel like I've actually been thinking a little bit more of like, oh, like maybe I should pace my holds a little bit more. And especially I have been putting off doing today's video because originally, before I actually like wrote out what I needed to talk about and like all of that, I had like had it in my head that I had had all of these books that I talked about the last time I did my library check-in and then didn't actually read. And so I was like, oh shit, I don't really want to like own up to that fact on camera. But then when I was actually like going through the books, like I realized like actually I did okay. So I'm gonna start out with the books that I checked out from last time, the things that I talked about in my last video. But like I said, I did not read as many of them as I wanted to. One of the things that did happen to me at the end of last year is that I got sucked into a very long Kindle Unlimited reading binge, where it was just like all I wanted was just like books that I could read in a deeply mindless mode. I was gonna compare it to like wanting a lot of reality TV, but I don't consume reality TV mindlessly. I consume it very seriously. It is very important to me. But like with Kindle Unlimited, a lot of the books that I was reading, and I don't think this is a function of Kindle Unlimited, though it could be, it's just like whatever it was I was finding that was appealing to me at the time. A lot of those books were very aggressively like mediocre. They weren't very good. They weren't very bad. There are a lot of books that I don't have like, you know, particularly significant thoughts about, which is again why I would not compare them to reality TV, because I always have so many thoughts about reality TV. When I talk about like feeling bad for not getting to the books that I wanted to get to from my last library checkout, it's really about the fact that I substituted those books with this very like kind of like, you know, extensive binge of books that like I know in the long run are not gonna last long for me, whereas the books that I would have wanted to read probably would have. But that's also just where my head was at. Like that is what I wanted. And so thank you to the Kindle Unlimited authors who made that happen for me, because it's just what my brain needed at the end of 2020. So with that said, let's get to the books that I was meant to read from my last library checkout, starting with the ones that I did not read. So the first one that I did not read, and my computer is down here, that's why I'm gonna keep breaking eye contact. First one that I didn't read was the illustrated Jane Eyre. And the reason why I have not read it is because I did not mean to check it out. I had actually meant to check out Jane Eyre, the non-illustrated version, the original version. I don't think it was meant to be illustrated, though maybe the people who did the illustrated version did a good job, but I don't know because I was not in the mood to read the illustrated version. And I have not yet put the correct version of Jane Eyre on hold, but one day I will, and then I will finally read it. The next book is Vesper Flights by Helen Macdonald, which is her essay collection that came out in 2020 that I'm really excited to read. I talked about this in that video. The reason why I had it from the library was because I forgot that I had a hold on it, even though I had already bought the collection from the bookstore. So that's why I haven't read it yet, because I have it, you know, on my shelf already, and so I just wanted to return it to the library so someone else could read it. The next book is A Mind Spread Out on the Ground by Alicia Elliott. I've heard such good things about this, and so this is like one of the ones that I definitely regret not getting to from my last checkout, because I really wish that I had read it by now, because every time I hear about it I'm like, oh, I need to read this book. So I will definitely be checking this out again from the library, either getting the physical hold. I do have it on hold on Overdrive, so for me, like waiting for that hold versus the physical hold, it's sort of just a debate of like, do I feel like I can drop everything right now for the ebook? Because that's the thing with Overdrive that kills me, is like you can only keep it for like 2 to 3 weeks and then return it. Like you can't renew it or anything. So that's the thing for me with ebook holds that is like very like, oh, I really hate this. Like ebook aside, the point is that I will definitely be reading A Mind Spread Out on the Ground. The next book is The Henna Wars by Adhiba Jargadar. That's another one that I definitely want to be reading at some point this year, just because it sounds so cute. And so again, just like for where I was at the end of the year, cute was not cutting it. I just like, I wanted something a little bit more, I don't know, whatever the end of 2020 was. So I will be checking that out at some point. Like I will definitely be reading it. With Beach Read by Emily Henry, that's one that I don't know that I really will be unless I hear a really strong case for. At the time that I checked it out, I think it had a lot of hype around it, but then sort of now, like, I'm kind of in like a, I don't know, when I read the plot, I just, I don't feel myself particularly excited. So if you want to make a really strong case for beach read, feel free to do that down below. And then the other one that I did not read from last time is Axiom's End by Lindsay Ellis. And I do want to read that, but I think I'm going to probably wait a little while. Like, I think right now I'm like in a pretty like fantasy-y mood. And I think right now sci-fi like just probably won't really be what I'm looking for, but I think I'll pick it up later. Next, from the books that I did read, my not so shamed list. First two are books that I talked about in my 2020 highlights and lowlights. So the first is Jin Patrol and the Purple Line by Deepa Annapura. Then the second is Kim Ji-young, Born 1982 by Cho Nam-ju, which was translated by Jamie Chang. I really enjoyed both of these books, so if you want to hear more of my thoughts on those, you can check out my 2020 video. Next is The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. So that was super good, definitely. Like, I've heard such good things about this. It's like a Russian inspired kind of fantasy with this girl who's like living in a village where she has like this like kind of relationship with nature and these kind of like old gods, and there's now like all of this Christian influence that's kind of like coming in and like disrupting a lot of this, and so she has to save everybody. And so that's the first book in the series, and I really enjoyed it. I love the writing. It has that very story tale kind of feel to it, and I really want to read the next two books. And I have had the second book in transit for like 2 months now, I think. I've had other books that have been in transit, like they've started getting in transit after that one and have arrived sooner. So like, again, I don't know where they're shipping the second book from. Like, maybe they're actually shipping it from Russia. I don't know what is going on, but it's taking forever, and I really want to read the rest of this series. The next book is The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones, which has been like one of those really hyped up books from last year. It's a horror novel. It's about 4 Blackfeet men who are contending with like the consequences of like one of those, you know, like one of those stories where basically like people are dealing with the consequences of something from their past. And this was one of those like very like creeping horror kind of books, especially because it's divided into like basically a few different sections. So the horror itself is very subdivided. And I am a total scaredy cat. So I would put this book like maybe around like a 7 or 8 out of 10 on the horror scale, where it was definitely like when it was in the middle of the horror, like I remember there's this one section where like for me, the horror got to like a real creeping dread. Like I flipped ahead like 5 pages to see what was going to happen and then flipped back, and then would flip again, like, and like turn the page and then flip again another 5 pages forward and then flip back. Like, I got to a point where I really needed to spoil the shit out of it for myself. So for me, like, that is like where it was at horror-wise, where I needed to spoil myself, but I was like not so scared that I couldn't even look at the book. Like, I've definitely had that experience with other horror novels where like once the horror hits, I'm like, I do not even have this book in my presence. You know, like the book in the freezer thing. Like, I haven't done that, but I've gotten close. And I think 7 or 8 on the horror scale is perfect for me. I do not need that level of horror. I don't need that kind of stress in my life. And I think that combined with a lot of other interesting things that Jones was doing with the characters and with generational kind of stories, that like I really loved how it all came together. Next, Vicious by V.E. Schwab. This was my first V.E. Schwab book, and I'm planning to do a video about my thoughts on this book. I really thought it was interesting how she plays with time in the book and how she's able to jump around a lot in time without it being like, at least for me, super disjointed. It felt really fitting for what felt like a very comic book story. Like, it definitely felt like each chapter, each little section felt like an issue of a comic book. There's definitely some storylines where I'm like, I don't know if I like the way this happened or the way this rolled out, but we'll get to that. And then the last in the books that I have read from that last library checkout is How to Do Nothing by Jenny Odell. This is a nonfiction book basically about like disconnecting, kind of. That's very reductive. She's kind of laying out like a whole set of thoughts and feelings that she's having about like how we engage with like social media, how we engage with ourselves, the notion of productivity, capitalism, all of these things. And so it's like a very kind of extended essay, a multi-chapter essay about how she feels about these things and how they relate to things that she thought about in art and productivity and all of these things. And this was a book that I wanted to read because I have been having my own set of thoughts, I think like a lot of people, about what role social media plays in my life and really kind of disengaging with it more. And so I'm glad I read the book. There are definitely things about it that for me did not fully register or did not hit. There's a lot of discussion about performance art that I am just like predisposed to be kind of like meh about. Like, it will not fully register for me because I just don't feel like I respond to performance art in that way. And especially because this is performance art that we are seeing her describe, that secondary distance for me does even more to kind of make me feel like very like shrug emoji about like reading about it and reading how it connects to these other ideas. But it wasn't a thing that like took away from the book overall. It was just kind of like, okay, there are parts of her argument that really, really resonate with me and there are parts that really don't. But I like respect the book overall for like how they reflect her own personal experience and journey with social media and the internet and capitalism and productivity and all of these things. Okay, so next are the books that I currently have checked out. The first is Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty. This is the last in her City of Brass series. I feel like having read the whole series now, for me, book one and like maybe the first third of the second book feel a lot like setup for what she's actually getting to. And once I got to the second, like halfway through the second book and through to the end of the series, I felt like it was almost like a different book. Not completely, but just like it felt like a lot more sure of itself. It felt a lot more sure of the world and of like all of the conflicts that it was trying to explore. But at the same time, I had found some of the setup in book one like a little bit confusing. There's a lot of ways in which the information was dispensed that I thought was just done kind of a little bit out of order and it just kind of muddied things up for me. And I think that carried through the rest of this series where like there are a lot of conflicts in this book that like in the moment I could like get like, you know, why two people were mad at each other. But then if there was a third or fourth note in this conflict, it started to get confusing about who is aligned with who, just because of like all of this initial setup that didn't quite come together for me. I am planning to talk about this in a video soon, either on its own or I might talk about it with a few other things, but this is a book that I will definitely be talking about because this was a weird month to read this book and I have to share that somewhere. Another book that I have checked out right now that I just finished reading, I have it checked out on ebook, is A Heart of Blood and Ashes by Milla Vane, which is the first book in her A Gathering of Dragons. Yeah, A Gathering of Dragons series. And the reason why I checked this book out is because I had actually seen someone, and I cannot remember who it was, recommend this book, or not this book, the second book in this series to someone else on Twitter. I think whoever was the original asker was looking for like fantasy romance recs, and they had mentioned this series in response. And they had also specifically mentioned that this book, this is the first book in the series, was probably not a good idea to read because it is a bit of like a frustrating read when it comes to consent. This is a, I guess, barbarian romance story is what you would call it. I am not very familiar with the world of barbarian romances, but like as you might expect, there is a certain expectation of brutality from a barbarian romance. And so like there is a war thing that's going on and that is one element of the brutality, which like I don't really mind, but it translates over into some stuff that happens between our hero and heroine that I think is a little bit more questionable. Especially like the setup is that the hero has found out that his parents are killed. He is led to believe that the heroine has basically been the one who's deceived them to their deaths. So when he initially meets her, he's like, I'm gonna fucking kill you. And then she's like, hey, actually, I didn't do this, but I hate the people who did and I can help you get them. So let's get married and we're gonna do a whole vengeance thing. And so there were things about the book and the dynamics that I thought were well done. I think like, especially like the hero, very like brutal warlord guy, a heroine, she's like a very, like she's dealt with a lot of trauma, but she's also like very smart and clever, and she is like very aware of like what like the difference is between someone who is an effective general versus an effective king. And so there's like a whole overlap of arcs there in terms of power that I think is interesting. But again, there is stuff that happens between them that feels done like mostly for the shock value, especially early on. So depending on your squick factor when it comes to certain types of sex scenes, especially a sex scene that involves blood, I would recommend avoiding this book if that sounds gross to you. I see why the person, whoever it was that had like suggested the second book in this series, actually noted to not read this book. Because if I didn't know that, like I would have been like, ew, like this book is a turnoff. The reason why I'm still probably gonna read the second book, like I have it on hold at the library, is because it has a highly specific plot that I am excited for, where it's like about two former friends, but one has had to put the other in exile because of like, I don't know, kingdom things, but now they're back together. Like, again, highly specific plot that I have really been wanting to read. And so I am going to be checking the next book out, and I have the assurance of whatever mystery Twitter person that I cannot remember, I have their assurance that the things that squicked me out with this book are not issues in that book. The other thing though that I'm sure isn't going to still be an issue, because this is a barbarian romance, there's a lot of like old-fashioned sex terminology, and like I don't know that I really feel the need to read sex scenes with like sheath and vessel used a lot. Like that is just, those are euphemisms for me that are just very like, ugh, I don't like it, you know? But whatever. I can be patient for the sake of that highly specific plot that I'm hoping to get from the second book. I have another ebook that I'm really excited to read, and that is The Return of the Thief by Megan Whalen Turner. This is her last book in the Thief series, which I really love. Fucking love that series. It has been going on for so long and it is finally coming to a conclusion. There was like a long span of time between like two of the books recently, and so they're just such good books, such good twists. I am super excited to read this. Next up, the one that I'm planning to read next is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This has had so much hype for it, and at the same time also plenty of people who dislike it almost like in complete like relative proportion to how much other people have loved it. So I am very curious. I started reading it and I think it's interesting that kind of like Vicious, it jumps around in time a lot. But we're gonna see how this goes. I think the thing I'm most worried / anticipating is that there'll probably be some slowness in the middle. At least that's what I get from some of the reviews, but I'm really intrigued by this premise of like this girl who like lives forever but like won't be remembered. So I'm curious. Next is Written to the Stars by Alexandria Bellefleur. This is like sort of rom-com-y. I've heard like loose comparisons to Pride and Prejudice, but also Bridget Jones's Diary. This is one of those books where I feel like I've heard good things about it. The one thing that I am cautious of is that it has a fake dating trope. And while I don't hate fake dating, I don't necessarily love it either. It's not one that like necessarily automatically grabs me, but I am curious about it because it seems like it'll be very cute. This is gonna be A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. Man, this book, I had this on hold at the library, and then all the stuff happened on Twitter about whether or not like people were mad at it for the way that it talked about Indian characters in particular. And then not having read this book, I didn't have strong feelings either way, but the way that people responded to people who were frustrated with that frustrated me. I felt like people were being very dismissive, and so I just like out of frustration took this off my holds and then put it back on and was very surprised by how quickly I got it from my library. This is, again, because it's one of those hyped up books, it's gonna have really good reviews and it's gonna have people whose dislike of it is going to be in proportion to how much other people love it. So I don't have much more to say about it beyond the fact that like I am cautiously optimistic because I have loved Naomi Novik's other books, but like there's also the part of me that is a little bit guarded because of the stuff that other people have talked about. And last up is Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse, and I'm super excited to read this just because I have been like, this might be apparent from the books that I have checked out right now, I've just been on such a weird fantasy kick right now. It's not weird. I feel like I'm actually reading a perfectly normal amount of fantasy, but it's been a while since I've read this much fantasy at once, and I've heard so many good things about this book, and in particular, I think something that Mari said stuck out to me. It was on Snark Squad when she was talking about stuff she had read for the year, but one of the things that she said about the book was that she never had the feeling of like when she was in one character's point of view that she was missing someone else's point of view, like that she was sad that we weren't like, you know, watching someone else instead. And that for me was like a big frustration that I had with Game of Thrones, was like, you know, when reading the book, like, or even watching the show where you're watching one character and you're like, I don't care about this person. Like that thing for me was really frustrating, and it's a thing that comes up for me with a lot of multiple POV books. And so hearing Mari say that like she did not have that experience with this book made me like even more excited for it, because now I'm like, yes, I want a book where I can get multiple perspectives. And especially with fantasy, like it is really cool because it lets you build out the world so much more and see things through so many different people's point of view. Like that is the point of it. So I'm excited to see that. So those are the books that I currently have checked out. I have actually a bunch more coming in transit. I was going to talk about them, but then I was kind of like, you know, who knows when they're going to show up? I have no idea for sure. So we're going to wait to get to those. The next time I check in, maybe I'll have read those, maybe not, maybe they'll still be here, and we'll see how I've done in the next month. So thank you guys for watching. If you want to make a case for me to read any of these books before any of the others, feel free to do so below, especially the books that I didn't get to for my last library check-in. If there's any that you're very much like, yes, Deboki, you really need to make sure you read that, go ahead and state your case. I will definitely take it into consideration. So yeah, bye.